lunch and dinner. So anyone that would like to come down and this is a lunch and dinner that's paid for by my staff, and all of the officers and their families are welcome to come down and enjoy a great meal and some good weather, and it's a wonderful time here at the sheriff's office. Listen, I want to mention something that I went to yesterday. Many of you may remember Dreshana Davis, who was murdered July of 2006. And in that horrific murder, Dreshana was watching television. Actually, she was watching Cat in the Hat with her younger brother and sister. And when the DuBose brothers began to pump bullets indiscriminately into the house, instead of running for her own safety, she covered them with her own body and actually gave up her life for her brother and sister. Yesterday, something happened that I thought is worth mentioning, and that's why I bring this up today, and that is Robert Salama and WCGL, a radio station, I think it's 1360. They did a bike giveaway yesterday in Dreshana's honor to remember her. And when I saw what they were going to do, I wanted to go out there and be a part of it, because I can tell you the night that Dreshana died, and I spoke with her grandparents that night, we all felt as though evil had prevailed that night. But I can tell you yesterday, when Robert Salama and the others were giving away bicycles to young boys and girls, many of which weren't even born when Dreshana was killed. It really was a tremendous honor to Dreshana to keep her sacrifice alive, and in fact I felt like Dreshana was victorious yesterday as those little kids were receiving their bicycles. And Robert made a great point to those children. He said, look, we're going to give you these bikes, but it's not from us, and they're not free. These bikes are not free. They were paid for by Dreshana Davis. And I just thought that was a tremendous honoring of little Dreshana Davis yesterday. And I just wanted to publicly thank Robert Salama for having done that, and WCGL for helping, and all the others who contributed to make that a very successful event last night. So with that also, I know we are struggling with our recruitment, with pension issues, with the drop, and I think is Dave? No?
Not yet.
Okay. We look. One of the things that I want to talk about is something that I've seen in the media here recently. One of the news outlets was talking about the fact that our murder clearance rate was less than 50%. But you can't look at clearance rates of murders a week after they occur or 2 weeks after they occur. And that's why we have a rolling clearance rate. And I just want to set the record straight for the public that clearance is when we are able to say who actually committed a crime and make an arrest in some cases. In other cases, you may not be able to because the individual may already be, they may be dead. But it's exceptionally clear if we're not able to make an arrest, but we know who did it. I'd like to set the record straight on this. Our murder clearance rates for 2013, last year, which is our last full year, was 54.8%, and the national average for the year before was 50.9%. And I can tell you, in every one of the Part 1 violent crimes, that's murder, rape, robbery, aggravated battery, aggravated assault, in every one of those, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office exceeds the clearance rate for the national average. So, yes, the clearance rate is going to be very low if you're talking about a case that occurred last week. So you have, sometimes when folks are throwing statistics around, you have to really be careful of how they're slicing and dicing those numbers. So I just wanted to challenge that issue and make. I'm sorry, but with that, I will tell you that we're on track for what?
We have a Facebook question from a Jeff Stoops. He posted on our Jacksonville Sheriff's Office Facebook page, and he would like to know how we get our schools from free fire zones. If a parent has a concealed weapons permit, they have to go home, lock up their weapon, and then go to the child's school. He feels it's silly and the fear is misplaced. He would like to know your thoughts on how we can end roads in getting this changed.
Yeah, look, it's funny that they use that term because I feel the same way. These killing fields are created when you have areas where you can't carry a firearm. And I believe schools, that's why we have officers with guns in our high schools and middle schools. We should have someone with guns in our elementary schools as well. You just saw the horrific attack that just occurred over in the Middle East. I mean, if you don't have weapons to protect yourself from the bad guys who have weapons, it's going to be a tough situation. Look, the situation at FSU, in that shooting, had someone in the library been armed with a gun, he might have only gotten 1 or 2 shots off. You never know. Now, the response from the police was extremely efficient and effective, and I think they did the best that they could. But to have these areas, particularly colleges and things, where no one is allowed to carry a gun, I don't think that is a very wise policy. I want good folks being able to carry guns. A good guy with a gun is the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun. That's why I wear a gun to church. Early on in our marriage, my wife always questioned. She thought that was a little sacrilegious, but she understands that now that heck, I've seen cases of pastors murdered in front of their congregation. And so as a police officer, as I explained to her, I want to have a weapon with me so that I have at least an even footing with somebody that might come into the church to commit a very violent crime with a gun. A gun is about the only thing that's going to stop a bad guy with a gun. So I think that's a great point that they made.
It is. We have another Facebook question. It's from Roger Sapora. Why is it that city cannot come to a conclusion on the pension fund for police and fire when they can find money for other projects?
Yeah. Well, I do understand, Roger, that sometimes not understanding how the constraints are on funds that the city can spend, that people look at it and they say, well, they spent $20 million on this, fixing a bridge. Why couldn't they spend, that $20 million on something else? Well, maybe that money is constrained to only be spent on infrastructure like that. So that comes into play a little bit. But I'm going to tell you, I think most of the issue with the pension has been because mayors and city councils have wanted to kick the can down the road. And I'm going to tell you that the plan that I see being pitched right now to cover the $400 million that they say they want to give to the pension, especially $40 million over 10 years. Look, this doesn't work in anybody's private financing. I don't see how it's going to work in city financing. You're going to borrow money to pay off debt, and then borrow 61 or have the pension pay you $61 million of officers' pension money to the city. So they're paying the pension with the pension's own money. I don't quite get how that's going to get us out of a hole. So I've got a lot of issues with what they're doing, but it looks more to me like they're trying to kick the can down the road 5 years instead of 1 year. And I'm concerned about where this is going to go. I know that the city council is going to vet this very closely, and the pension trustee board will as well. So I'm confident that that they're going to do their due diligence. Thank you, Roger.
That's your call.
Sheriff, David Bauerline's on the phone with the Times Union.
Yeah, David.
David Bauerline with the Times Union.
Hey, David. Good to see you.
Yeah, listen, I appreciate you taking my call, Sheriff. What I wanted to talk to you about is pension reform, and what your perspective is from your position as sheriff, really in regard to both retaining and recruiting employees, how that's affecting you right now, and also if you can look ahead, if the pension reform changes as put forward by the city council were to take effect, how that would affect your ability to retain and recruit high-quality people to the sheriff's office.
Yeah, thank you, David. Listen, this whole pension issue has created a very difficult recruitment situation for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. The whole economic situation of the city that really has been driven by this pension issue for the last several years. And look, to try and fix this with just the benefit changes. Look, there clearly have to be some changes to the benefits. I concur with that. For example, going from a 20-year to a 25-year, changing the drop on paying out a guaranteed 8.5% for 30 or 40 years. That's not sustainable. And the rank and file understand that too. I think they would agree with that. However, the sacrifice, this shared sacrifice that they're talking about, these guys are already sacrificing. Look, we haven't had a pay raise in over 8 years. In fact, we had a 3% cut in pay. That is impacting my ability to, one of the things that you didn't mention is retention. I'm having a hard time retaining people who, haven't had a raise in 8 years. They had, in fact, had a 3% cut in pay, and we were already, back when all of this started, we were already 92nd in the state of Florida for starting salary. David, I can't even name 91 cities in the state of Florida that could possibly be making more money than the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. How can that possibly be? And when you talk about the fact that, look, I've been complaining about this unfunded liability in the pension for probably 8 years. 8 years. And it all started when they rolled back the millage rate. Every taxpayer in the city of Jacksonville got a break on their millage rate. And in fact, here's the schedule of the reduction in the millage rate, who did it, how much money they took out of the pension reserves from not just the police and fire pension fund, but also the general employees pension fund, which is also $1 billion almost in debt, which nobody's even talking about. And so I'm concerned that they're trying to kick this thing down the road another 5 years with this $400 million, and where that's going to come from. I don't see how in the world you borrow your way out of debt and then pay the pension with their own money. The $61 million of chapter funds, I just don't see how that really helps.
I think in terms of the changes for the new hires, if those take effect, do you think that JSO will become a feeder agency for other departments, or do you think that you can still attract people that'll make a career in Jacksonville under those benefit provisions?
David, we've already become a feeder system. Look, if you go back just a couple years ago, back probably, say, 2005, 4, 3, during that time, you could count on one hand, the number of people that left this agency to go be a police officer somewhere else. And that's for my last 32 years. In the last, or 38 years. In the last 2 years, what we see is people leaving this agency to go be police officers all over the country. I lost, I think it was 5 SWAT members in one fell swoop to Colorado. So yes, we've already become a feeder system. I'm not worried about it happening. It has happened. And David, it has hurt our recruiting efforts. It's hurt our retention numbers. Look, the layoffs, the RIF, the reduction in force that we went through. You know, laying off 48 bodies, not to count the fact that we're 147 officers short. We're 92 community service officers short. We need to be restoring those officers, but that's going to be a difficult nut to crack when there's no pay raises. They're already, not only have they not had a pay raise, as I mentioned, they took that 3% cut in pay, and now their pension is changing. And look, the pension was set up the way it was because they agreed to take less in salary. And so now it's kind of a bait and switch, which I don't think is fair to the men and women of this agency. And again, I'll remind the public that they all got a break on their ad valorem property taxes as the city was taking money out of the pension reserves.
You don't have a vote on this pension reform package, but if you did, would you vote for it or vote against it or vote for it if there were changes? How do you feel about it?
No, I would not. David, I would not vote for it in the format that it is right now. I think there's some good things in there. I think there's some necessary changes in there, but there's also a couple things that I do not agree with. So, as you know, I'm really waiting to see how they're going to cover this $400 million that they're wanting to pay the pension to help get us out of this $1.6 billion debt. And I also want to know what the impact of the general employees pension fund is going to be. Because listen, in this year's budget, and the public needs to hear this because this is how we got into this mess. What they did was every year the city would budget money for the pension fund, the police and fire pension fund, but then they wouldn't spend it all, they wouldn't give it all to the pension fund because of vacancies or whatever. Well, if your actuarial is based on you putting in such an amount to get the earnings off of, if you put in less than that, not only do you short the pension that money, but you also short them all of the earnings from that money. And so what what I just saw happen in this last budget cycle, there was $1.2 million still in a line item in my budget that was supposed to go to the general employees pension fund. They didn't do it. The city swept it back. The city takes it back. They spend it wherever they want. And the unfunded liability on the general employees pension fund just went up another $1.2 million. That's exactly how we got into this mess with the police and fire pension fund. And so until we stop that, I'm really concerned about whether any change to benefits is going to get us out of this hole.
Michael Howard, who is a UNF professor in their criminal justice department, he has a blog, and he blogged that he is basically telling his students who are coming through his program that after you graduate, look elsewhere besides Jacksonville because the situation's too uncertain. But wouldn't having pension reform provide some certainty so people at least know here's what it is? Or do you think there would still be, even if there is a pension reform deal that's agreed to by city council, people still would feel uncertain if they hire and go to work for Jacksonville that they can say for certainty what their benefits are going to be for their career?
They do need that certainty, David. That is really where we're actually dying on this thing. The uncertainty is causing, as soon as an officer hits their 20 years and they're fully vested and they can go into the drop, they're all jumping in the drop at 20 years. Everybody. In fact, we just had a historically large number of officers enter the drop. And it's all because of this uncertainty. They're afraid of what's going to happen, whether they're ever going to get another raise. And so they're all entering the drop at 20 years. And that is a brain drain that this agency can ill afford. And so this thing's got to be fixed. But I don't want to see it kick down the can kick down the road for 5 years either. 1 year at a time hasn't worked. 5 years, is not going to help either. So some of those benefits have got to be changed. I agree with that, and I know that the pension board is going to be working with the city council. I'm sure they'll come back with some suggestions that may make it more palatable to the rank and file. When my undersheriff spoke to the city council last week, after he spoke, Councilman Gulliford got up and said, well, if we created this savings that these pension changes will make, we could hire more officers. And my answer to that would be yes, but first you need to take care of the ones that we've already got here. But put in that bill that you're going to give them 15% over the next 3 years. So, guarantee them that they're not going to be 92nd or 102nd in pay salary for the state of Florida. That's ridiculous. We're never going to retain officers, and I started to say we're the only agency in the state that requires a 4-year degree. I believe we are, but I'm not absolutely sure. But that recruiting folks that have a 4-year degree for our starting salary is very tough.
Yeah. Well, Sheriff, do you plan to go to the Police Department Pension Fund Board, talk to them directly, or communicate with them in terms of any concerns you've got about the process or where the things stand?
Oh yes, I talk to John Keene and the members of the pension board all the time.
Sheriff, those are my questions. I really appreciate you taking my call. Thank you so much.
All right, David, thank you. And I should mention, David, too, that the CSO program that was cut.
Yes.
Since 2011. That was a great feeder system for us, particularly in our minority numbers. And so to now, now that we don't have that program because of budget cuts, that's been a hard hit to maintain our minority numbers as well. Although we're doing well agency-wide, because we're able to hire non-4-year degree folks in the Department of Corrections, but it's made it very difficult to hire minorities with 4-year degrees, or even a 2-year degree, which is one thing that I did as well. I lightened, if you will, the requirement by saying, okay, if you have a 2-year degree, but 4 years related experience, then we'll hire you also. Of course, then once they come on, they have to get a 4-year degree before they can be promoted. So that helped ease the pain a little bit, but recruitment is definitely a challenge right now.
One more question on that point of recruitment. When you're talking about who you're competing against, there's been some comparisons with how the changes would stack up against, say, what sheriff's offices in Northeast Florida are paying their police officers and what their benefit package would be. What's your frame of reference? Are you comparing yourself to other law enforcement agencies in Northeast Florida? Are you recruiting against Orlando?
Yeah, when I talk,
who's your competition for these best and the brightest?
Yeah, it is those large agencies you just spoke of, David. But you know what I reference when I talk about our pension and where it ranks throughout the state? I think it was September 2008. Your own Florida Times Union did a study of police pensions throughout the state of Florida. And you know what y'all found? We were very middle of the road. Our pension benefits were very middle of the road. Those same benefits are the ones that they now want to change substantially. And so our pension was already middle of the road, albeit I will admit that the drop was too rich the way it was. But our salaries are 92nd in the state, or they were. They're even lower now, I'm sure. And our pension benefits were middle of the road. So yeah, it's going to be very difficult to go to those same agencies and recruit.
All right. Okay. Thank you again, Sheriff.
Thanks, David.
Melissa?
Thanks, David. Sheriff, we have a Facebook message from Roger Sapora again. He has another question.
Okay.
He said, considering what has happened in Ferguson and New York City and a few other towns, How are your officers going to be trained to handle these types of situations?
Very good. Roger, the key here is what I call putting goodwill in the glass. Look, when I talk to my top administrators and when I talk to my executive staff, I talk about our need as an agency to put goodwill in the glass. Everyone's heard the old adage, is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? Well, I believe there actually is a correct answer to that. And the answer is, it depends. Now, it's not a trick. It does depend. If I'm drinking, it's half empty. If I'm pouring, it's half full. So what I want my folks to understand is that the water in that glass represents goodwill in this community. And so at some point, I know we're going to have to drink from that glass. We're going to have to tap into that community goodwill. We're going to have to be able to resource the relationships that we have built in the community. And so it's important that we do that all the time. And we're always looking for ways to do that, because at some point we're going to need to drink from that glass. Now, the way we've done it in the past, we've changed the entire philosophy of policing here at JSO from what I call it's a very fine line that the police walk between what the community will see as protection and what they will perceive as oppression. And if you go into a community that's suffering high crime, for example, if you go into that community and all you do is kick butt, take names, put people in jail, they don't feel like you're there doing something for them. You're there doing something to them. And so we've moved into this model of community problem solving, where working through our SHADCOs, our Sheriff's Advisory Council, through our neighborhood watches, we work with folks in the neighborhood to figure out what problems they have in their neighborhood that we can help them solve or solve for them, in addition to driving the violent crime out of their neighborhood. Excuse me. Now, we have over 3,000 SHADCO members throughout the city of Jacksonville. So we're constantly in contact with these folks. They know the officers that ride their neighborhood. And I would encourage everyone listening, go to JAXSHERIFF.org, JAXSHERIFF.org, that's JAXSHERIFF.org, and click on the SHADCO button, find the nearest one to you, and join it. Become a member of SHADCO and work with the local law enforcement in your particular area of the city. We break it down to 19 different jurisdictions throughout the city. And that's the best way really to keep those relationships in the community alive. Now, another thing that we do, it's called walk and knocks. If you remember when we kicked off our Operation Ceasefire out near the King and Myrtle Avenue areas just this fall or spring, that the very first thing that we did was a tactic we now call walk and knocks. We went into those areas with extra manpower. I moved resources from all over the city because we're so short. I've got to draw from all over the city. We put them in that area, and we didn't go in there and just start putting people in jail and looking for the bad guys. We went in there and knocked on 13,000 doors, telling the public, we're here to help. Here's how you can help us. And we handed them all packets of information on how they could get involved. SHADCO, calling the Justice Coalition, working with First Coast Crime Stoppers, giving us those tips. A lot of different ways that they could help us drive the criminal element, the violent criminal element, out of their community. That works. Our tips go through the ceiling. People that talk about the communities not calling us and telling us what they know, that's true to some extent, but I can tell you, we have a lot of folks calling us and telling us what's going on in these communities. The challenge sometimes is proving what they tell us is true. So there's a lot of different ways that we continue to put water into that glass, that goodwill into that glass. Our Citizens Academy. I challenge all of you out there. Again, go to our website, JAXSHERIFF.org, click on Civilian Academy, or Citizens Academy, and you will see there's a program there where for 4 hours every Thursday for 12 weeks, we give folks an indoctrination into their JSO. And so I would encourage you to get involved in that. There's a lot of different outreach that we do to keep pouring water into that glass. And I'm very proud of the fact that over the last month and a half, that other than some folks shutting down the bridges, they did remain peaceable even when we arrested them. But we haven't had the rioting and the looting that other cities have had, and so I'm very proud of our community for not having taken it to the illegal extreme.
We have a Facebook message from a Susan Baker Singer, and she's asking you to please address and discuss gun safety. Especially when you own a gun, you need to know its whereabouts at all times. Make sure your child or nobody else can get a hold of that gun, because they may shoot themselves or a family member or use it in a crime. She says she's all for freedom to have a gun, but please know where it is at all times, a safe place.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. Yeah, listen, Stephen, you're absolutely right. Every time I talk about gun ownership, I talk about responsible gun ownership. And that means you store your guns properly. You don't leave them in your unlocked car overnight. You don't store them in your car even if it is locked. That's not a good idea. And don't leave them laying around your house. If you have children, I would encourage you to train your children how to use a gun, so that it takes that mystery out of it. They know how to use it. They're familiar with it. So it's not a mystery that draws them to it. And look, good, safe gun ownership is what I propose. And if you're going to have it, you need to know how to use it. So go to a range, fire regularly, handle it administratively. That's when most people accidentally shoot themselves with a gun, is when they think it's empty. Trust me, empty guns kill more people than loaded guns. So, we need to put forth the idea that, look, if you're going to own a gun, you've got to do it safely and properly. And the number of guns that we have stolen out of cars, I don't have the exact number off the top of my head. I know it's over 1,200, I believe, or 1,400 last year. That's an atrocious number. And those guns are being sold on the street and resold on the street, and they are being used in crime.
Talk a little bit about people that haven't seen our latest Christmas video on our YouTube page.
Yes. Hey, listen, y'all got to go see this. I'm telling you. Go to. There's a public service announcement that our traffic officers did, and this is the kind of the flyer on it. Go to JAXSHERIFF.org, and where's it at on there?
It's in our newsroom, or they can just go to YouTube and search Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
Oh yeah, go to YouTube and just search Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, and it's a pretty cute ditty that they came up with too, and I think it's the Jingle Bells, right? Wasn't it? I can't remember what the song was, even though I was there. Santa Claus is coming to town, yeah. But it's hilarious, and I want to say a great big thank you to all of my traffic officers, because they did a fantastic job, except the singing part. Just kidding. But don't drink and drive, folks. And that's really what the song is all about, is not drinking and driving this Christmas season. Keep yourself safe and keep your family safe and the others out there on the road. Look, I can see how somebody can start off drinking, and before they know it, they got a buzz and they're like, "Ooh, now I got to get home." Call a cab. Don't get in the car. Call a cab, or find somebody that hasn't been drinking and give them your keys and let them drive you home. But do not try to drive yourself home. We're really trying to reduce our traffic fatalities during this time of year, and help us out with that. They're down, but we need to keep pushing them down even lower, because it's a terrible. Listen, we lose more people to traffic crashes every year than we do to murder. Right now it's at 117. Our murder numbers are at 90. So that tells you we got as many people dying on the roadway as we do from murder. So please, drive responsibly. Don't drink and drive, and be safe. Call a cab.
Phil Rogers posted on our Facebook page, Sheriff Rutherford, As a retired correctional officer with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, I want to thank you for doing a great job with what you have had to deal with putting up with the City Council and a budget that keeps going down every year.
Yeah, well, thank you, Roger. But look, I want to make clear one thing. The City Council, in this last budget cycle, I was very enthused that the mayor's folks had told us they were going to restore 40 of the 147 officers have been cut. They were going to restore 40 of the community service officers that have been cut. And of course, when the budget got to the City Council, the first thing they did was they had to cut those positions because there was no revenue in the budget for those positions. The budget was something like $236 million in borrowed and one-time money, and there was no way that the City Council could pass those positions. So I wasn't upset with them. I was upset that no one in the mayor's office addressed the revenue needs of this city. And when you compare our millage rate to the millage rate of cities around us, cities and counties around us, you'll see that we're at the bottom of the list, and we've been there for too long. Look, people want a quality of life. I've said this many times, and they're willing to pay for that quality of life. And the reason I say that with confidence that they're willing to pay for it is because people are leaving Duval County, moving to other counties that have a higher tax bracket, and they're going there because they want their schools, they want their crime rate. And look, people want their children to go to school to be educated, not beat up and bullied. They don't want their family members being murdered in their homes. They don't want their children dying in the carnage on our streets. And so what they've done is they voted with their feet. Go look at the Blueprint for Prosperity report from 1990 to 2000. The number of people that left this county was tremendous in that one decade. And so, and I'm sure it's only gotten worse. So it's very important that we address at some point the revenue needs of this city. We rolled the millage rate back all the way to 9.65 from 11.5. And in fact, if you go on our website and look up this chart right here, you can see how the mayors have rolled it back while they were taking money out of the pension fund, or the pension reserves. So it is a challenge. Look, I'm trying to police a city with 1,603 police officers, which is down, as I mentioned, 147 from where we were. All 92 community service officers. We've got a several $100,000 study that we did when Mayor Payton was here. Mayor Payton and I hired a firm out of California, the Matrix Group. They came in, looked at the JSO, they looked at crime in our community, and they said, you guys should have another 225 officers, which at that time would have put us at 1827, I believe. Now, we never got to 1827, but we got to 1750 with Mayor Payton's help. And so with Mayor Payton's help, we saw crime, violent crime in Jacksonville, all crime in Jacksonville was the lowest it had ever been in 2011. Our murder, in fact, our murder numbers were lower in 2011 than they were in 1971. Think about that. And that's raw numbers. Now, we've probably grown 2 or 3 times the population that we had back in 1971. So then what happened? In 2011, we started cutting. Since Mayor Brown has been in office, we have lost 147 police positions and 92 community service officer positions. It's no wonder that violent crime and murder are starting to tick back up after a record low in 2011. And so I want to thank Mayor Payton again for the Jacksonville journey and getting me those officers that helped us drive crime down to record low numbers.
Very good. Roger Sapora posted another message on Facebook saying, well, asking you all the shootings that are happening in Jacksonville. Do you agree it isn't the problem with the guns, it's the people behind the guns?
Exactly. Listen, I could take off the gun that I'm wearing here right now, set it on this table. It will never become violent, ever. until some human comes along and picks it up and uses it violently. And so we don't have a gun violence problem. We have a human violence problem. But let me tell you why everybody wants to talk about guns instead of the human. Because they understand if they start talking about the human, then you got to talk about values. And if you're going to talk about values, then you have to talk about virtue, faith, then you get into God. How terrible. So nobody wants to have that conversation. And so, you know, I've been telling folks for years, crime is not about economics. Crime is about values. Clearly, it's about values. In fact, people were asking me when when the economy was up, our crime was high. And then when by 2011, when we're in the middle of this recession or depression, whatever you want to call it, an extended recession, crime was going down. And people were like, how can that be? We thought crime was supposed to go up. Well, crime's not about economics. Crime is about values. And I evidence that by the fact that there are a lot of poor people out there that would never think of sticking a gun in your face and taking something that belonged to you. They would never do that. On the other hand, there are folks with a lot of money that will rip you off through Ponzi schemes and other, so crime's not about economics. It's about values. And the fact that, we need to start having that discussion in our community. The Founding Fathers knew it. I would encourage all of you to go look at an article called The Golden Triangle. The Golden Triangle, written by Os Guinness. O.S. Guinness. Oz wrote this article about that what the Founding Fathers did. What was so amazing was not just the fact that they created this Constitution that had this, separation of powers, but that they also understood that if we wanted the freedom that this Constitution could bring, then we had to have a virtuous population. And that virtuous population would require that they be a faithful population. And if you had the faith and the virtue, then you could have the freedom that our Constitution guarantees. So go read that article, The Golden Triangle by Os Guinness.
We have only 6 more shows with you, Sheriff, after today. But we want to remind people that they can call in, email, Facebook, and tweet your questions all month long. Our Twitter's JSOPIO, and our Facebook is the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
Right, and I want to wish all of you out there a very Merry Christmas and a safe and Merry Christmas and a Happy Hanukkah, and God bless all of you. Have a great and prosperous New Year as well.
Thank you.